Lunch and Learn. I am so glad that you are here. We are embarking upon a new topic in this half of the semester. We're talking about RSI, and we'll dive into what those letters mean. And the crux of what we're talking about today is the difference between presence and participation. Are you really engaging your students? So recognizing how do we get those students engaged, and also how do we get ourselves engaged in the classes? Today, we'll have an introduction. What is RSI, regular interactions, substantive interactions, 4 components of RSI, examples of RSI, and RSI across modalities. I'm Laura Thompson. I'm an instructional designer here in the CCIT department. And although I am housed at Stanton campus, I am often in other places, and I'm always available online. So to start with, we want to do a little bit of a warm-up that is a question of what is one way that you regularly engage your students. So take just a moment to think about something that you do to regularly, on a schedule, engage your students. Some individuals will make sure that they're giving weekly announcements. Some will also send emails or will send something through a Remind app, some other kind of communication channel. So really, what is RSI? Well, RSI are regular and substantive interactions, and it's substantive or substantive. But we want to talk about what RSI really means. We're going to dive in this a little bit more. We're going to talk about those regular interactions. So regular interactions are scheduled. They are those weekly announcements that go out every week. You can schedule those through Brightspace to deploy every week, and they could be, for instance, summaries of what happened last week and a preview of what's supposed to be happening this week. Now, regular and substantive interactions, it really is a big deal for asynchronous courses. It takes us from the level of a correspondence course where we're basically just checking boxes. Did we do that? Did we finish it? To now being able to feel more engagement in the course. And it's important for a few reasons. And we'll talk more about those reasons, but we want to make sure that the main reason is to ensure that our students are engaged and that we are engaged with the course. With this regular communication, we can schedule it so they know at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, I can count on an announcement going out into the class. RSI does need to be instructor initiated. So you want to make sure that you are initiating the conversations and not just waiting for students to ask questions. I've had some instructors tell me, yeah, they don't ask any questions. Well, we need to be proactive and put the information out there for them. If we've taught this course several times over 2 or more semesters even, we already have some idea of where the sticky points are, or where students tend to need a little bit more information or a little bit more encouragement, reminders about assignments. We can be proactive and instructor initiated for those. Now, we do want to move this into learning related conversation. So it's not just a, hey, how are you? Hope you have a great weekend. Although that interaction is not bad, and it helps to build the community. It helps to build that sense of relationship in the class. We do want to have academic related conversations. We want to think about being multimodal, which means that we're looking for different ways to communicate with our students. Some instructors might poll their students, how do you prefer to be contacted? And some just offer 2 or 3. Now, there are 2,858 ways to communicate. I'm sure there are. However, you as the instructor, you do not have to cover them all. But you can say, I'm going to send weekly announcements. I will communicate with you individually through email. I have a specific discussion board set up in the course where you can ask me specific questions there, and I will check that every 2 days, whatever your policy would be. That's offering multimodal. I sometimes will even call my students if I haven't heard from them for a really long time. But again, you're responsive. So when students do reach out to you, you're responding to their needs in a reasonable time frame. This is something you can set up with your students. You can say, I intend to get back with you within 48 hours. Maybe you're intending to get back with them within 24 hours. Any more than 48 hours, and they tend to feel like they're just left out there on their own. But if it's in the policy, if you have it written into the policy that within 48 hours, and then of course you're trying to do it sooner than that, then it helps students know what they can expect. And again, these are documented things. So I like to use my class list when I communicate with students. In Brightspace, you can access your class list and send emails directly through the class list. You can send it to 5 students and they won't see each other on the list. They'll just see the message, or you can send it to 1 at a time. The thing that I like about it is I get a draft of that message sent to my email so that I have a documented copy that I had sent that communication. It's for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, I documented that I'm reaching out to them, but two, if it's not just I think I did, I can go, oh yeah, I really did. I really did contact them. I meant to, and I did, and that helps me. When we're thinking about this then, how have you regularly communicated with your students? Do you use regular announcements? Do you use intelligent agents that are designed through Brightspace that they deploy right after a test is taken, or 2 days before a test is taken to remind students that it's coming up, or 1 day before an assignment is due to help students know that it's coming? And are you responsive to their needs? And do you communicate maybe through a couple of different channels? Now we talk about substantive. We want to make sure this has to be content related in order to be counted as substantive, because we're really talking about their coursework. Again, it's instructor initiated. There's a two-way dialogue. It's not just you put your nuggets of knowledge out there and students aren't able to respond to you. There's a little bit of a give and take here in the feedback. Again, multimodal. And I'll talk about feedback in just a second too. But let's think about how we can be content focused and academic in our nature. So for instance, our communication needs to be directly connected to those course materials. If you are only sending messages to say, don't forget that assignment is due, that's not substantive. That's just administrative. We want to make sure that we're promoting understanding and critical thinking. So in those times that we're interacting, for instance, in discussion boards, we want to pose a question, an open-ended question, or provide a real-world application of what's happening in that discussion board. Discussion boards are another way that we engage with our students, and we can do that in a fairly regular fashion. I'm not saying you have to respond to every one of your 25 students, although on my first discussion board, I usually am, well, no, I do. I respond to every student on the first one. After that, it's 5 or 6 students, depending on the size of my class. But I make sure I'm not always responding to Katie just because she's spectacular and she always answers right away and there's something there for me to say. I try to spread it around so that other students actually do get that interaction with me as well. And in my responses, when I'm really on it, really thinking about it, I give them hints to look at other people's responses, because often in the discussion board, we want them to reply to others. So I will talk to them about, oh, well, you could see that Lillian had this type of answer. You might like to look at her response to give you more information. Or you might look at Jalil's response because he was really covering 3 steps in this method. There's a couple of benefits for that. One, it gives them a way that encouragement that they can go interact with other students. Two, although you are the expert in the class, it shows that they can get information from other resources, because they won't be with you forever. Eventually, they won't be in your class, or they'll be out in the world. So they need to recognize that they can find support in other places as well. Another thing that I do for substantive communication is, remember, we have that scheduled communication that goes out on Mondays that's a summary of the week and a preview of the next week. I like to try to send out ones on Wednesdays or Thursdays when we've had discussion boards, and in those in those announcements, I can share, oh, here was Katie's response, and check out Jalil's response, and check out Jill's response too, for these reasons. It's not just directing them, giving them a sentence or two about why they would do it. Here's a couple of examples too. If we're going to talk about their discussion post or an assignment, really, I'm sure you can extrapolate this, but we're going to say, good job on your discussion post. No, that's not substantive. But if we say, I appreciate your perspective on this topic, how do you think this theory applies in a real world situation? And if we're actually going to take it one step further, we're going to say, how does Hofstede's theory work in business when we're applying it to cultural dimensions? We're really going to bring in that specific nature to help make sure that it's substantive. We also, one response we might say is good response to the reading. However, to make it more substantive, we would say, you made a strong argument about X. Have you considered how Y might challenge your position? We can also say, or some people might feel compelled to respond, here's the answer to your question. But that's not really substantive. Helping lead students to other conversations about it, that's an interesting point. Can you expand on how you arrived at that conclusion? That can give students more opportunities to think. However, I do think there's a fine line between allowing misconceptions and finding out how students reach that conclusion. So definitely use your professional discretion in that. Again, we don't want nice work. We want to say you've identified key elements in the theory well. Now try incorporating an example from our reading to support your argument, especially if that was something that was in the assignment. So these are different ways that we can have students interacting with substantive comments. Now, to just go on to our feedback as well, feedback is often traditionally finite. It is here, it's for this assignment. And it often focuses on what didn't go well, what needs to be improved. There's another term called feed forward, where we're very explicit with students about how they can take the feedback we're giving them and put it into action in the future. So it's not just, oh, well, you didn't describe this well, this is vague, or this argument wasn't well developed. We give them an idea of how they could improve their argument. You could improve this argument by making 3 salient points about blah, blah, and blah, or by presenting a quotation to support what you thought, or by citing the resources that you've used to develop this point, whatever the action is. And then we say, so in your future papers, be sure to incorporate that. On the other side, it's also important if they've done something well, because sometimes our students who do well, they don't get a lot of feedback. It's a nice job. They don't get a lot of feedback. But if we point out, wow, this part where you began this paper with a quotation and then you supported it in that first paragraph, that's a great technique. You can use this again for a powerful beginning. Or if we look at a report that students have written about an experiment that they've done, you really described these steps well and in a reasonable chronological order. Be sure to do that again. If we take just a few moments to provide that type of feedback, we're helping our students, one, see that our feedback is valuable because they can use it to increase their performance in the future. And we give them just that extra little boost of instruction again. So try to think for a moment about an example of a substantive interaction that you've had with a student. I gave lots of examples just now, but I do know instructors who have shared being able to give tips in students' writing or giving them tips in their math performance in a variety of departments where they're able to be specific in that feedback. Some instructors might have a feedback bank or a feed forward bank where they pull statements from, say, a spreadsheet or a notebook that they keep, and they pop it into student rubrics or into areas for feedback. And that's a really great way to start, but you'll want to provide at least a sentence or two that help to make that feedback specific to that student. So even if you know that there are issues that that you often see in student writing, you'll want to have a sentence or two that you add. That's often what I do. Even if I have a feedback bank, I will add a sentence or two that makes it more specific to that student. So consider that. Now, RSI, one of the reasons we're talking about these regular and substantive interactions is for compliance. Because our courses, if they're merely correspondence courses, we're all just kind of checking boxes, we did what we did, those are not going to be eligible for financial aid the way that all the regulations stand currently. So we want to have those richer experiences in our classes where the instructor is there, is present, and you're present through your communication with your students, through these things that are personalized to the students, through these modalities of communication. This is how you ensure that students feel a greater connection to the course and that they are more engaged. Also, certain programs in their accreditation must have regular and substantive interactions as part of their accreditation. So there's two reasons beyond just it's good teaching to be regular and substantive in your interactions with students. It's good teaching. And it's not just online, because I think if we're all honest, we've experienced instructors in our past lives, in our college studies, and maybe high school, I don't know, but when the instructor wasn't really there, they were there, we were face to face, but they weren't really there. They weren't really engaged in the course. They didn't really get to know the students. They just were putting in the time. And we want to avoid just putting in the time. So even in our face-to-face classes, we want to be sure that we're engaging in these practices for students and for ourselves to feel more enthusiastic about what we're doing. So I want to remind you of 4 components. Instructor-initiated interactions. These must come from the instructor. And there needs to be an element of regularity or predictability in the frequency. For instance, every Monday at 8, an announcement's going out. You do want to make sure that there's academic focused communication going on, that it supports the content of the course, not just administrative things. And you want to have engagement in academic matters. And in order to engage in those academic matters, we are making sure that we are talking with our students, again, in that substantive way, and it's a two-way communication street. We're inviting that communication back to us, understanding that not all students take advantage of that invitation, but we want to make sure that it's there. All right, so we're going to play a game. And this game is going to be RSI or non-RSI. Ready? Okay, here we go. The instructor posts a thought-provoking question related to the week's topic and actively engages with student responses, asking follow-up questions and providing additional insights. RSI or non-RSI? If you said RSI, you got it right. Ding, 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 gold star, gold star. Excellent. Here comes another one. The instructor gives only numerical grades or generic feedback like good work without substantive comments. RSI or non-RSI? Absolutely right. It was a non-RSI because it's just kind of that good work. It's platitudes and it's not really giving any meaning to those responses. All right, one more. Instructor provides detailed constructive feedback on assignments, highlighting strengths, suggesting improvements, and asking students to reflect on their work. RSI or non-RSI? Absolutely. It is an example of RSI because they're opening up for that two-way communication as well. So again, I wanted to re-emphasize RSI across modalities. We need to have it in our online asynchronous. Absolutely, absolutely, to be federally compliant, but also to be good online instructors. In our hybrid courses, we might feel like, oh, we see them sometimes in class. I don't have to be so present online. But it still is that balance between making sure that they know that online matters too, and face-to-face matters. And the combination between the two, your face-to-face will be richer if you have a strong online connection with them as well in your hybrid courses. Then in person, even if you're in person, we talked about how we might have our LMS, which is Brightspace, support us. One of the ways is, for instance, with a discussion board. If we are face to face and we are having this lively discussion, there's bound to be a couple of students on the fringe who aren't participating for a couple of reasons. Maybe they're language learners, second language learners, and so they're not able to generate the language that they need with the vocabulary that they want to participate in these conversations when it's really lively and rich like that. We're not getting everyone involved. And we might have just other students who like to think a little bit, who like to process. And then unfortunately, by the time they've come up with their answer, you're on to the next topic. So having a discussion board in Brightspace that also supports your in-person students is important. It gives them the opportunity to have their voice heard. It gives you the opportunity to assess their understanding. And I say assess, it doesn't mean that it always has to be graded. But for instance, if I'm having a lively conversation in my face-to-face, I may say, okay, we have to end this conversation now, but I'm going to post a discussion board, continue it there. And not everybody will. Unless it's graded, but you give them that opportunity. And when you participate in that discussion board, you get the chance to hear the voices of the quiet students in your class. Or you're ready with one that's graded and you have students get in there and interact with the prompt that could be a continuation of what you did in class. Use your professional discretion to see how that works for you. There are other Brightspace tools that we've mentioned, so I'll briefly mention them again. You've got the announcements, you've got intelligent agents, you've got discussions and discussion boards that you can use. There's also feedback and rubrics. Many of our assignments have a rubric, and we often go into the rubric and we go click, 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 whatever number, whatever level we think it is. But there's the opportunity that you can provide feedback within that rubric. I often do this if a student earns less than the first two columns, especially. I want to give them a little bit of feedback about how they could improve their performance in the future. And I'll put that directly in that feedback, right in that rubric, so they understand what category I'm talking about. Or sometimes if I give a little bit of partial credit, they're between this level and this level of the rubric. Well, they weren't quite this, but you weren't quite here. I'll explain that, tell them how I gave them a little bump and an extra point too, or something like that. And then they'll understand where that came from. You also have the overall feedback area in Brightspace, and you have the opportunity that you can type or write if they are paper submissions. PDFs or docs that you can write right on the paper itself to provide feedback. And you can give audio or video feedback for students that gives them just a little bit more of those social cues so that it's not just feeling like it's so critical, and when they're reading the text, oh, they infer the meaning because we don't know what their experience was before with feedback. So maybe their past instructor was very critical and very not nice in how they responded. So they read all feedback that way. If you provide audio, they can at least hear your voice. And if you provide video, they can see your face, see your hands moving, see the smile on your face, or the legitimate concern, whatever level it is, but they get a few more social cues. But please, I'm not saying audio and video for every single assignment, but maybe if you've had them turn in a draft that they need to adjust in order to perform well on their final version of a project or a paper or a presentation, you might take that opportunity to provide some video or audio feedback that helps them with an added level of information. So here's a place for your thoughts to just pause and think about a takeaway that you want to remember from today. And I do thank you very much for coming today and for enjoying Lunch and Learn with us. And I hope that we will be able to see you again in the future. Take care.